So this is the first project you're going to be building. It's a three-piece puzzle, and here are the dimensions. This is the drawing. You've received two boards in your toolbox. Each one will make three pieces like this. Now they're not very long, exactly this long, and as you can see, that's a pretty small piece to be holding and cutting and chiseling if you also have to clamp it down. Very awkward. So I recommend to make it out of a longer piece. You could lay out all three pieces, all your lines, on a longer piece and do your cutting afterwards. I know that I've said in the past that's not the best way to do it because you will lose some length to the thickness of the blade. However, the only thing that you're cutting is the very ends of the pieces, and the length of these is fairly arbitrary. In fact, you could do the same puzzle and have the pieces much longer if you wanted to. So we won't worry about losing a little bit of length to the saw blade in this case. It'll just make it a whole lot easier to hold on to. So let's look at the dimensions here. The two boards you've received are already 13 millimeters thick and 39 millimeters wide. That's the same length as each of these mortises. This is very much like a tenon and mortise in that they fit inside each other, and it should be a nice snug fit. The mortise is 13 millimeters wide, the same thickness as the board. This opening here, this notch, we'll call it, is 13 millimeters wide, the same thickness. This one is less than that. It's 4 millimeters wide, or less than this one is. And you'll see why that is later, but these are important. You'll have to get these sizes accurate. The other thing to notice here is that these mortises are centered both ways on each piece. That will be important as well. So let's look at how we can do that if we're going to cut this board and chisel it as one long board rather than three small boards. So as always, you're going to start with a square end to measure from. This one is nice and square. So the length is 110 millimeters. This will very much be an exercise that requires a sharp pencil. Carefully set your square and take your time. Now this will get us the center both ways if you very carefully go to the corners. If you have a sharp pencil and this end is square and this line is square, then this will find you the center. Now, we can eyeball this. We can use the thickness of the board to transfer onto this one where the mortise will go, and then get these marks as accurate as you can. If you go to the outside and mark it along this board, you're going to make your mark much wider than it needs to be. Then you'll really have to work well inside of your marks. This tends to be more accurate if you just follow the very edge of your top board like that. If you have a marking gauge, now you could set it to that mark. You could mark the entire length of your board, both sides, like this. But you'd have to do a lot of sanding later to smooth it. So if you're going to use a marking gauge, just mark off um, the very center where the mortise will be cut. If you don't have a marking gauge, no problem. You don't have very many pieces to do, and you can simply repeat the same thing you did here for the other ones. And another way to do it, I'll take a larger square because you guys are using a larger square. Another way to do it would be to simply set your square, and you can transfer it over to the next piece like this. But we haven't marked the length here yet, so let's do that right away. 110 millimeters right there. And you might even want to mark all three of your boards for length and find your centers first before you start marking the mortises themselves. Mark this one off here. Now, you could do this going the other way as well. You can simply line up to the center of this board here and then just transfer the very edges carefully. Now this is the layout marks of the mortise you're going to cut. You're going to do this with a chisel, and you should have a 3/8 or 10 millimeter chisel in your toolkit. Let me grab a chisel. You're going to be cutting, this one is actually a 1/2 inch or 13 millimeter chisel, so you're going to notice it's a little bit wider. You're going to put the tip of your chisel just to the inside of that pencil line. Go ahead and clamp this down, and I'm just going to show you. You put the tip of the chisel just to the inside of the line, and especially now we're going with the grain, you go really slowly, and you tap really lightly. You concentrate on following the very inside of that pencil line. And take your time with this. This is what's going to make all the difference. You can hit it a little bit harder across the grain. Okay, notice that my fingers are well behind the tip. I'm resting my hand actually right now on the top of the bench hook. Once you get a first cut all around, you can then very gently, you can have the bevel side up and then just pare into here a little bit. You don't need much pressure at all, just very lightly tap it. And then with the bevel down, you can just take a very thin paring and then go at it from both sides. So come back this way, and if you want to get underneath there, put the bevel up like this, just to get it started. I'm trying to stay out of the shadow here, like that. Okay, and you go along. And as you take that away, then you go around again, take a few cuts. Don't go more than halfway through. It will give a much better result if you flip your piece over, make the markings on the other side, and then go halfway into the mortise from the other side as well. You're going to get a much more accurate cut that way.